In the twilight of the Everglade realm, under the waning moon, Elira stood atop a petal-strewn balcony, her eyes fixed on the glowing crown atop Queen Lunara's head. The crown shimmered like silver fire, each jewel pulsing with ethereal light. A hush fell over the land as if the forest itself dared not breathe. The queen raised her arms, whispering chants older than time, and for a moment the stars aligned in reverence. But then something cracked. A single sapphire dimmed. A tremor of dread crept through Elira's heart. She clutched the railing, her knuckles white. All was not well. The queen faltered mid-incantation. Her eyes blinked rapidly. "The balance, it's slipping," Lunara said, voice barely audible. Her crown flickered, its radiance dulling like a candle smothered. Elira stepped back, confused and afraid. "What's happening?" she whispered. No answer came. The sky darkened unnaturally fast. Animals stirred below with unease. This night, once meant for celebration, had turned sour. A gentle wind rose, carrying with it the scent of wilting blossoms. In that moment, Elira knew this was the beginning of something sacred breaking. The queen collapsed to her knees, and silence claimed the world. In the hours that followed, a hushed panic stirred beneath the soil of the Everglade. Elira wandered the palace corridors, heart pounding like a trapped drum beat. No one would speak. No one dared. The crown had dimmed before, centuries ago, but never in Lunara's reign. The silence was loud. She remembered stories whispered during nightfall of what happens when the moonlit crown loses its light. Wart, disease, madness. She pressed a hand to her chest. The queen had not risen. Healers fluttered in and out of her chamber, robes soaked with stardust and sweat. Outside, the realm wept. Flowers closed early. The fountains slowed. Elira passed a mirror and didn't recognize herself. Her innocence had vanished, replaced by a question that wouldn't leave her. What if this is my fault? She couldn't name why. But something inside her had broken when the sapphire faded. Maybe it was a memory not yet born, or a truth too ancient to see. She turned away, swallowing fear like glass. The queen's chamber was sealed by vines only the ancients could undo. Elira sat outside its threshold, back against the cold marble wall. She listened. No sound came through. No breath, no whisper. "Let me in," she had begged the guards, but they'd looked at her like she was a ghost. She felt like one. Time moved strangely. Minutes stretched like hours. Her fingers traced the floor, cool and damp. Then she saw it, a flicker beneath the vines. Light? No memory. A vision. A younger Lunara, placing the crown upon her head for the first time. The gem burned brightly then. "The crown accepts only balance," Lunara had once said. "It reflects the heart of its bearer." Elira blinked. Why was she seeing this now? Why her? The vines trembled slightly, sensing her presence. Is the crown rejecting her? The thought stabbed. And if so, was the realm now untethered? The air grew heavy. The magic was shifting. Whispers followed Elira wherever she went. Servants averted their eyes. Scholars buried themselves in scrolls. She wandered into the royal library, hoping to find silence. Instead, she found prophecy. A book with no title fluttered open on its own. Its pages glowed faintly. She leaned in. "When the crown dims, the bearer's past awakens," the text read. Her heart stuttered. Was this what the queen feared? Her own past? Or Elira's? She thought back. There were no visions, no signs. But she'd always felt different. Like the stars watched her too closely. She turned the page. An illustration showed a young woman bearing the crown, her face obscured. Elira reached out to touch it, and the ink shimmered. For a moment, the figure looked like her. She gasped, yanking her hand back. The book snapped shut. The lights dimmed. A single question echoed in her mind. Who was I before I was Elira? Elira stood on the moon terrace, where once the queen crowned champions. The stars above were distant, indifferent. The wind tugged at her gown like a warning. She felt the pull of something deeper than curiosity, something ancestral. "Why now?" she whispered to no one. She looked toward the darkened spires of the palace, a world of answers hidden behind stone and time. Her fingers brushed a carved rune on the railing, and her vision blurred. She saw herself standing in the same place, but dressed differently, older, wearing the crown. Then it vanished. A hallucination? Or memory? The terrace beneath her feet hummed faintly, reacting to her presence. It had never done that before. Something ancient had stirred. Her breath hitched. She wasn't just a witness to the queen's fall. She was part of the unraveling. Elira awoke before dawn, drawn by a whisper only she could hear. It came not from the walls or wind, but from within, a quiet tug in her chest like a forgotten promise. She stepped barefoot onto the dewy palace lawn, guided by instinct more than reason. Her breath puffed white in the cool morning air. She walked toward the fountain of Orus, once a wellspring of light and song. But the water had dulled. No melody rose from its depths. She knelt beside it and peered in. Her reflection shimmered, then changed. It was still her, but older, eyes full of sorrow and wisdom, lips moving in silent warning. Startled, she stepped back, heart racing. Behind her, the palace windows began to glow. Morning was breaking, but Elira's world remained in shadow. "What are you trying to show me?" she asked the reflection, but it vanished. All she saw now was herself, young, frightened, and utterly alone. A tear slipped down her cheek and vanished into the cold stone. Later that morning, Elira entered the Hall of Whispering Leaves, a sacred chamber where the wind was said to carry the wisdom of past queens. As she stepped inside, the trees outside bent toward the windows. Light filtered through stained glass, casting fractured colors across the floor. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a dried lotus bloom wrapped in silver threads. Elira reached out but hesitated. She felt it again, that inner tremble, like memory surfacing. The wind picked up, circling her, and a whisper brushed her ear. "Seek the mirror beyond the veilwood." Her heart leapt. She turned, but no one was there. "Who said that?" she whispered. No reply came. Only the rustling of ancient leaves. She looked again at the lotus. It had begun to glow faintly. A path was forming, both outside and within. For the first time, Elira didn't feel paralyzed by fear. She felt called. Elira followed the path through the palace gates and into the outer woods. The veilwood awaited. No fairy dared enter it willingly. Its mists confused time, and its shadows whispered forgotten truths. But Elira walked with purpose. Her feet knew the rhythm of the trees. Birds grew silent. Branches swayed, unnaturally. A fox with silver eyes watched from afar, then vanished like smoke. She came upon an old stone arch tangled in vines. This was it, the threshold between the known and the forgotten. The air thickened. The wind carried old lullabies and warnings. She hesitated, breath shallow, but then stepped through. On the other side, colors were richer, sounds deeper. Magic here was raw, unfiltered. Every leaf seemed to breathe. Her journey had shifted. The realm of mirrors and answers lay ahead. Somewhere in this enchanted place, truth waited like a wound aching to be reopened. Inside the veilwood, time fractured. Moments felt like echoes of themselves. Elira walked slowly, surrounded by shifting light and spectral murmurs. The deeper she went, the more the world around her shimmered, like it remembered 1,000 versions of her. Then she saw it, a mirror, tall and freestanding, encased in twisted roots. She approached cautiously. In its surface she saw a vision, not of herself, but of Queen Lunara as a young girl crying beneath the same trees. Then the image changed. Another girl, one Elira didn't recognize but felt deeply connected to. Her own past self, or a memory buried by magic? The mirror pulsed. See? It seemed to say. Elira reached out and touched the glass. Pain shot through her, sharp and ancient. Visions flooded her mind. Crowns, flames, choices, regret. She stumbled back, gasping. The mirror returned to stillness. But now, she knew, the path to saving the crown ran through memory, not magic. Elira staggered away from the mirror and collapsed beside a glowing tree root. The visions still pulsed behind her eyes. She wept, not from fear, but from the weight of truths too long buried. She saw herself again and again in different forms, different lives. Always near the crown. Always making choices that fractured balance. The thought terrified her. Am I doomed to repeat the same pain? She whispered. Then she heard something, laughter. Gentle, childlike. She looked up. A young version of herself sat nearby, swinging her legs from a tree branch. You can choose again, the child said. Elira blinked, unsure if it was real or memory. But the words stayed. She rose slowly, steadied by the earth. The forest no longer felt foreign. It welcomed her. As she turned to leave, the path opened wider than before. She was no longer just walking toward answers. She was becoming one. Elira returned to the palace, but the world felt distant, like a place she once knew in a dream. She walked among marble halls and whispered courtyards, now changed by what she'd seen in the Valewood. Her eyes carried memory's weight. Every surface echoed past lives. As she passed a stained glass window, light fell across her face, and she paused. It depicted a queen, one she'd never seen before, yet she recognized her expression, proud, fierce, grieving. The image sparked something. Elira's vision blurred, and suddenly, the hallway dissolved. She stood in another time wearing robes not her own. She was older, surrounded by chaos. A throne room shattered by fire and fear. Her voice cried out, I never meant for this. And then, silence. Elira gasped, back in the present, hands trembling. She sank to the floor. A servant rounded the corner but stopped short, seeing her pale and shaking. Are you all right, Lady Elira? She shook her head, unable to speak. The past was no longer distant. It lived inside her now. Elira sought refuge in the Temple of Memory, a sacred chamber hidden beneath the palace. Few knew it existed. Only those marked by fate could pass its threshold. The door recognized her touch and sighed open like a breath long held. Inside, crystalline walls shimmered with scenes from history, fragments of triumph and sorrow. Elira stepped forward, drawn to a glowing shard that hovered midair. As she reached toward it, the crystal flared and engulfed her in light. She was elsewhere again, watching a young Lunara plead with elders. The crown must not be passed by fear, Lunara said. It binds itself to what we carry inside. The elders dismissed her, afraid of what the crown might reveal. Elira watched the younger queen walk away, defeated. Then, Elira felt herself again, older, distant, a different life, one who chose power over peace. The memory split her open. When she came to, she was crying. How many lives have I broken? She whispered. How many chances have I lost? The crystal had shown her sorrow, but also something else, resilience. Elira wandered the reflection garden outside the palace, its pond still and deep. She had come here as a child, chasing butterflies and sunbeams. Now, she came seeking understanding. She sat beside the pond, watching her reflection. But the water stirred, and the image changed again. She saw many versions of herself, young and old, kind and cruel, radiant and broken. Each face stared back with knowing eyes. We are not our worst mistakes, one said. Nor our greatest triumphs, another added. The wind rustled the trees as if in agreement. Elira placed her hand on the water's surface. I see you now, she said. All of you. She didn't feel whole. but she no longer felt alone. The reflections remained a moment longer, then vanished like smoke. And for the first time since the crown dimmed, Elira smiled. Not out of joy, but out of quiet courage. That night, Elira was summoned by an elder she barely knew. Archsage Valian, keeper of the soul scrolls. He had watched her from afar. "You are awakening," he said. "But awakening comes with pain." She nodded. "Then, I must keep waking." He led her into the archive of echoes, where scrolls of forgotten lifetimes pulsed with magic. One scroll unraveled before her. Her name was written across it, different spellings, different tongues, always hers. "You've walked these halls many times," Valian said. "And each time you came close." Elira's hands trembled. "Close to what?" she asked. "Redemption," he replied. "Not for the crown, but for yourself." She looked at the scroll again and wept. Not out of guilt, but out of relief. She wasn't cursed. She was returning. Returning to the truth she had once known and lost. And this time, she would not turn away. Later, alone in her chamber, Elira lit a single candle. Its flame danced in silence, casting long shadows. She unbraided her hair, letting it fall freely, and stood before her mirror, not the enchanted one, but the simple one beside her bed. "I have been many things," she whispered. "But tonight, I choose to be present." Her reflection didn't change this time. It held steady. She reached out and touched the glass. Cold met warmth. The past no longer consumed her. The future no longer frightened her. She breathed deeply. The world outside remained uncertain, the queen still unconscious. But inside Elira, something had shifted. She knelt beside the bed and whispered a vow not to the stars, but to herself. "I will not run from what I am." And in the stillness that followed, something ancient stirred, not in the palace, but in the soul of the realm. A light unseen, reborn within. At dawn, Elira stood before the sealed doors of the queen's sanctuary. The vines had changed. No longer hostile, they shimmered faintly, responding to her presence. She placed her palm against the wood. A warmth pulsed beneath her skin. Without a word, the doors creaked open. Inside, Queen Lunara lay silent, breath shallow, crown beside her, lifeless. The air was thick with stillness and sorrow. Elira stepped forward, unsure, reverent. The moment felt sacred. She knelt by Lunara's side, studying her face, so familiar, yet now distant. "You gave everything to protect us," she whispered. Then, a sudden wave of memory surged. Elira gasped. She saw Lunara's first trial, as queen, alone, scorned, doubted, crying before an altar. She had never wanted power, only peace. And Elira had been there in another life, a shadowed figure whispering doubts into her ear. She recoiled. The pain was immense. "It was me," Elira breathed. "I was the one who planted fear." The truth was unbearable, and yet freeing. Elira fled the chamber, breath ragged, soul fractured. She ran through gardens, past guards and gazing spirits, until she reached the Hall of Roots, a chamber where the realm's magic lived in its purest form. She collapsed before the ancient root throne, sobbing. "I am the wound," she cried, "not the healer." The room responded, roots shifting, groaning, recognizing her pain. Visions returned. Not flashes, but full scenes. She saw herself in lives where she betrayed, where she chose power, where she turned from truth. Each vision struck like thunder. But then came another, one of her embracing a fallen warrior, forgiving a dying enemy, lighting a lantern for a lost child. Balance, dull. Shadow, and light. The hall pulsed, acknowledging both. Elira stood, trembling, but stronger. "I cannot change what was," she said. "But I can choose what is." The throne glowed briefly, not in judgment, but in acceptance. Later, Elira walked the path of echoes, An ancient spiral trail walked only by those seeking purification. No one spoke. The trees bent inward, silent witnesses. Each step felt like shedding skin. Her bare feet met warm stone, each footfall a prayer. Along the path mirrors floated, each showing a different self, arrogant, jealous, lost, loving, wise. She did not look away. She bowed to each image. She honored them all. Halfway through, the path darkened, swallowed by a tunnel of silence. She walked on. At its center, no mirror waited. Only a still pool. She knelt beside it. Her reflection was just herself, present, breathing, imperfect. "You are enough," she said aloud, voice trembling. The tunnel pulsed. The path behind her began to glow. She had faced herself. Not to conquer, but to witness. That was the turning. That was the truth. The realm trembled subtly that night, not with fear, but with anticipation. Word spread that Elira had walked the path, that she had seen what others could not bear. Inside the high chamber, the council gathered. Archsage Valian spoke softly. "The balance is shifting." The elders turned to Elira as she entered. Her steps were quiet, her eyes steady. "What do you see in us?" one asked. She paused. "Potential. To break cycles. To begin again." Murmurs rose. Another said, "You carry guilt." Elira replied, "So did all who wore the crown." Silence followed. No one refuted her. She stepped forward, uninvited, and placed her hand over the center of the stone table. "I do not seek to rule," she said. "I seek to remember." The council lowered their heads, not in shame but in reverence. A choice had been made. And it was not power. It was presence. That same night, beneath the moon now half full, Elira returned to the moon terrace. The air was still. She held the crown, not to wear it, but to understand it. It was lighter than she expected. As she lifted it, moonlight pierced the clouds and bathed her in silver glow. She closed her eyes. Visions came, not of pain, but of healing. Trees regrowing. Laughter returning. A queen setting down her burden. The crown pulsed gently, not with power, but with peace. "You no longer need me," it seemed to say. Elira smiled and set it down upon the stone. The moment held. Not because she had claimed it, but because she had released it. Her journey was not over. But her suffering had shape now, a contour that curved toward awakening. The terrace fell silent again, but something had changed. The realm knew. So did she. The next morning, the queen awoke. Soft gasps echoed through the palace. Elira entered the chamber, heart pounding. Lunara sat upright, pale but alert, her eyes meeting Elira's with quiet recognition. "You've walked the path," she said. Elira nodded, words caught in her throat. Lunara's voice was weaker than before, but clear. "You've seen the truth, haven't you?" Elira whispered. "I saw what I was, what I feared, and what I can still become." The queen smiled faintly. "Then you are ready." She gestured toward the windows, where light streamed through like blessings. "The crown has been waiting, not to be worn, but to be understood." Elira hesitated. "What if I fail again?" Lunara replied, "Then you will rise again. This is the way." Elira stepped back, tears brimming. There was no ceremony, no trumpets, just stillness between two women, one fading, the other becoming. And in that stillness, everything changed. Later, Elira entered the Hall of Moonlight, where the crown awaited atop a pillar of white stone. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of magic. The moment felt final, but also like a beginning. She walked slowly toward it. Her reflection shimmered in the marble floor. With each step, a breath released from her chest. She reached the pillar, gazing down at the moonlit crown. The gems were dim, but no longer dead. "I do not claim you," she said. "I recognize you." The crown pulsed faintly. She did not lift it. Instead, she placed both hands beside it, bowing her head. Light surged outward in quiet waves. The chamber responded, walls breathing, shadows retreating. In that silent offering, Elira let go of needing to be perfect, of fearing the past, of craving redemption. And the crown responded, not with brilliance, but with balance. As Elira stood again, the floor beneath her began to glow. Ancient runes ignited in spirals around her feet. The council, summoned by unseen forces, entered silently and watched. Archsage Valian whispered, "She is not ascending power, she is surrendering self." The crown floated briefly, its light warm and even. It hovered before Elira, then gently dissolved into silver mist. Gasps filled the room. Elira reached out, but the mist drifted into her chest, sinking inward. Not a gift, not a burden. A warning. A truth returned. She closed her eyes, feeling it settle deep within her spirit. When she opened them, no one spoke. There was nothing to say. The crown was no longer a symbol. It was a part of her. Not worn on the head, but carried in the heart. A quiet stillness followed, more sacred than any coronation. The palace did not erupt in celebration. Instead, the skies cleared, and a warm breeze swept the land. Across Everglade, the balance slowly returned. Flowers that had refused to bloom now opened. The fountains sang again. The animals wandered without fear. Elira walked through the outer gardens, not as queen, but as herself. People watched her with reverence, but not for her title, for her presence. She greeted each soul with soft words and open eyes. No decree, no demands, just quiet acknowledgement. A child approached her, eyes full of curiosity. "Are you the new queen?" they asked. Elira smiled gently. "No," she said. "The crown is resting now." The child tilted their head. "Will it ever wake again?" Elira replied, "Only when it's needed." And then, for the first time, she laughed. Not out of relief, but out of freedom. That evening, Elira stood atop the cliff's edge, overlooking the valley bathed in twilight. The stars blinked softly above. She did not speak. She simply stood. The wind wove through her hair. In her hands she held no relic, no crown, just a single white feather found earlier on her walk. She let it go. It floated on the breeze, rising before gently falling into the dark. "Letting go is the final gift," she whispered. Her voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. Far below, the lights of the realm flickered with life again. The night was still, not with emptiness, but with peace. Behind her, the palace waited. Before her, the world turned quietly. Elira turned toward the future, not to control it, not to master it, but to walk beside it. And in that walk, her true path began. The following morning, Elira walked through the sanctuary of stillness, a garden of stone and sky, far from the palace. It was said those who entered could hear the soul of the realm. She heard nothing at first, only her footsteps across the pale marble. Then, silence took on shape. It pulsed. It breathed. She sat beneath an ancient willow, its branches silvered with dew. Eyes closed, she listened, not with her ears, but with something deeper. Her breath slowed. For the first time, she did not search for guidance. She allowed the moment to be enough. In that stillness, a voice rose, not a sound, but a knowing. "You are not here to lead. You are here to be." Elira opened her eyes. Light filtered through the leaves like soft gold. The world was unchanged. And yet, everything had shifted. She smiled, not for what she had done, but for what she had become. Later, Elira returned to the ancient market square, once crowded, now calm. People gathered slowly, drawn by her presence. They did not cheer or kneel. They simply came. Elders, children, wanderers. Elira spoke softly. "I am not queen. I am only Elira. But I walk with you if you'll walk with me." Murmurs rose, not of resistance but of resonance. A baker handed her bread. A healer offered a flower. A child gave her a painted stone. She accepted each with quiet gratitude. This was not rule. It was relationship. No crown marked her. No decree defined her. Yet the people followed, not out of fear, but out of trust. She did not promise protection. She promised presence. In her humility, they saw strength, and in her stillness, they saw home. That evening, Elira sat by the reflecting pool, its surface still and glowing with the light of twin moons. She placed her hands just above the water. It shimmered, not with magic, but with clarity. She saw her reflection again. This time, it smiled back. Her fears were not gone. Her doubts still whispered, but they no longer ruled her. They were voices in a greater symphony. Elira took a deep breath. "I am the keeper of silence," she said. "The watcher of peace." She did not need to be understood. She needed only to be present. A white crane passed overhead, casting a long shadow across the water. She watched it glide, unhurried. Like her, it needed no permission to exist. In its flight, she saw her own release. No mission, no redemption, only being. And in that, she was free. Elira wandered the Valley of Ancients, where monuments of past rulers stood silent among stone and vine. She walked barefoot across mossy paths, touching each sculpture with reverence. Not as one who sought to join them, but as one who finally understood them. "They tried," she whispered to each. And that was enough. She came to an empty pedestal, one never filled. She smiled. Let it stay that way. Her journey was not toward legacy. It was toward presence. She knelt and placed a single blossom on the pedestal. The wind stirred. No monument would bear her name. No statue would remember her face. But the petals, gently resting in silence, were enough. She turned, the path behind her blooming softly. The past no longer asked her to become more. It welcomed her as she was. Night fell, and the stars blinked into being. Elira returned to the palace terrace, where once she had feared her reflection. Now she welcomed it. She looked across the realm. It pulsed, not with perfection, but with rhythm. Life moved, changed, returned. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I am ready to walk, not ahead, not behind, but with." A soft breeze answered her, not as approval, but as accompaniment. She turned inward. Peace no longer felt distant. It lived within her, quietly, patiently. She no longer reached for crowns or symbols. She reached for nothing. And in that emptiness, she found fullness. A servant lit a lantern nearby. Elira smiled. "Let it burn gently," she said. "Not for glory, but for guidance." And then, in the quiet of her heart, she took her place. Not on a throne, but within the rhythm of all things. Morning mist rolled gently across the Everglade as Elira stepped into the meadow of whispering reeds. A soft hush surrounded her, broken only by the rustle of wind and the distant call of birds. Here, the world did not ask. It simply was. She walked among the reeds, fingertips brushing them lightly, as if greeting old friends. She had no destination, only presence. Every step was its own reward. Every breath, a gift. She sat beneath a bent willow and let the wind speak. "You have come far," it seemed to whisper. Elira smiled. "And still, I remain." There was no burden in her chest, no question pressing against her ribs. Her story was not ending. It was unfolding. Not in fire, not in glory, but in gentle, unseen ways. A dragonfly landed on her palm. Enchanted. She watched it for a while, then let it go. That was her path now. Not to hold, but to witness and release. Later that day, Elira stood among the archives once more, not as a seeker, but as a witness. The scrolls greeted her gently, pulsing with calm light. She did not search. Instead, she listened. A scroll unfurled, showing no words, only light that danced and pulsed like a heartbeat. She understood. Some truths cannot be spoken, only lived. She placed her hand above it, and a warmth filled her palm. Not power, not prophecy, just recognition. She had been many things across lifetimes. And now, she was simply Elira. Not lesser, not greater, just true. As she turned to leave, the scroll rolled itself shut. No applause, no revelation, just stillness. The greatest transformation had not been learning more. It had been needing less. And that knowing would carry her through every step that followed. The sun began to set as Elira walked alone to the ancient spring near the forest's edge. She sat beside its waters, watching the light shift from gold to rose to indigo. No one knew where she had gone. And for the first time, no one needed to. The water was still. The trees quiet. She took a smooth stone from the ground, held it, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the stone, but to the path. The trials. The silence. The fear. The remembering. "Thank you for not answering," she said, "so I could learn to listen." She placed the stone into the water, watching ripples bloom outward. Each one carried a version of her, leaving gently, not disappearing, but softening. She closed her eyes and let dusk wrap her like silk. No finish line. No title. Just dusk. Just the breath between endings and beginnings. Night returned. Elira entered the moon garden for the final time. The flowers glowed faintly, as if waiting. She stood at the center, arms at her sides, eyes open to the stars. A breeze passed through, and she lifted her chin to meet it. "I carry no crown," she said. "I carry the stillness it left behind." The garden shimmered. For a moment, the light around her formed a shape, a crown of moonlight hovering above her head. But it did not settle. It simply glowed, then dissolved into air. Elira did not weep. She did not bow. She stood with her hands open, receiving nothing and everything. The petals around her stirred, whispering truths she no longer needed to chase. The moon above gleamed, not as ruler, but as witness. As Elira turned to leave, no footsteps echoed. She had become the quiet. At dawn, Elira stood beside a stream. A child approached, barefoot and curious, holding a bundle of wildflowers. "Are you the queen now?" they asked. Elira knelt, eyes warm. "No," she said. "She no longer needs a crown." The child looked puzzled. "Then what are you?" Elira smiled. "Someone who remembers." The stream burbled quietly. A heron passed overhead. The child offered the flowers. Elira accepted them, then placed them in the water. They floated gently, following the stream's soft current. "Where do they go?" the child asked. Elira said, "Where they are needed." The child beamed. "That's magic." Elira stood and nodded. "Yes, but not the kind you chase, the kind you carry." They walked together into the light, no destination, just steps. The story did not end. It dissolved, into stillness, into motion, into the sacred breath between all things. And the moon, high above, bore silent witness.